Hello, this is Cluster API breakout meeting. We're going through grooming for funsies. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully folks can see my screen.
Yep, it's good.
All right. So we sent this list to discuss a while ago, 4 days ago, about sort of like overall priorities of what, we're definitely going to commit to. So the way this typically rolls is that priorities are all relative based upon commitment, right? So if you're going to commit to something, then it'll always kind of bump up in priority because that means you're going to try to deliver it within a given milestone. So these are the priorities that current VMware folks are going to see as a commitment. And if other folks want to help bump other things around or help other efforts, more power to you. Like the certificate storage story, bumping up probably would be a good thing, but it's just a matter of how many resources we have to do the work. So
are we using the raise hand feature, or is this small enough that we can talk freely?
We should talk freely.
Okay.
So were you gonna say something?
The certificate P3 thing, I think is a requirement for remote node references.
It's a requirement for remote node references.
We do need to have some aspect of certificates for remote node references, most likely. I think basically, like, if you look at what Kappa does right now, where the certificates are not stored securely, we could make minimal changes to at least like the data model for the Kube-ADM certs and still store them insecurely, not consider that story is done, but achieve remote node references. I'm not saying we should do new work and design it poorly from a security standpoint. So it may end up being a little bit of a balance in terms of what's easy and quick to do, but may be incorrect, and then what we can do for real later.
But these are all relative, right? This is kind of the way we currently see it. So we can always bump things around if folks are going to commit to it. And it's a swag at first, and then we, as we iterate and get through there, we'll reshuffle the priorities. But this is like the first pass filter. Are there other things that folks wanted to like prioritize as definitely committing to in this cycle?
I guess my question is, like, are we going through like RFEs filed somewhere and assigning them to these categories?
Yeah, so what we'll do next is we're going to create a milestone, and the milestone's already there, but we're going to give it a date, and we're going to kind of assign a bunch of labels to it and give it some relative priorities, and people who raise their hand and say they want to work on it, go ahead and raise your hand, and we'll shuffle the work around.
Okay, I guess how do you go about getting a feature, generally requested and user story? Like, I guess that's the kind of part I'm missing, because it seems like that part of the process is what we've been doing recently with proposals and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Typically, the way it's typically done is like before we go into planning, we have like some basic set of like, these are more or less features or user stories, right? But you can always open the issue at any time, and we can always triage and address it. So like, it's meant to be continual, right? This isn't like a one-time pad. So if there's something that comes up and be like, hey, that's a great idea, we should try to get this done this cycle, open the issue. There's templates for RFEs on the repository. So if you do a new milestone, my bad. It's Friday. There should be a template for feature enhancement, and we might want to beef up this template, to be honest. It's kind of lacking, I think.
Yeah, the file and the features one item. That sounds like it's pretty straightforward. But then, what's the process to getting it groomed and added to the backlog?
It should be every cycle. So like right now, we're just going to do the first pass. So like every meeting, we should be continually grooming.
Yeah, so this is not something that has traditionally been done since I got involved in Cluster API at the beginning of the year. Jason or Vince, since you predate me, had you all done any backlog grooming in the past?
So we've done it kind of on and off in the past. We did it more consistently in the burn down to delivering V1 Alpha 1. But after we delivered V1 Alpha 1, because we were going through the process of trying to define future work, it fell off the table a little bit.
Yeah, and I'm usually a backlog, I don't know, for lack of a better term, Nazi, because it's the source of truth, right? It should be what people are looking at to define things, which we should be arguing about for some features, whether or not they make sense, right? So that's the point of discussion. So file them at any time, and for the next couple of months, I'm going to try to help moderate a little more to try and get us into a cadence and a system, a cycle, so that way it's like other projects, right? So I run the several sub-projects in the community, and the way I run it typically is that every single meeting we go through, and anything that's new gets triaged. And that's part of the process, and then we talk about other issues that we want to address.
Okay, that sounds reasonable. Yeah, it just seems like that piece of the puzzle is missing because we've obviously been preoccupied with other things in recent meetings.
Yep. So I want to get us into a rhythm, and then once we get our sea legs working again, we can start to address new issues that come in. So first question, date. So we said 6 weeks offset from Kubernetes cycle. So does anyone know when 1.16 releases or is supposed to release?
We also though said like the V1 Alpha 2 might be different, just to prove. So in the other meeting we talked about end of August for V1 Alpha 2 and then starting the 6-week cadence.
I think so. 1.15 should be out kind of in a week, I think, approximately. Yeah. So if you add 3 months to that, so you go from mid-June to mid-September, and then 6 weeks after mid-September would be essentially November 1st. So if we want to do 6 weeks after 1.16, approximately November 1st, but as Vince mentioned, I don't want to necessarily force the group to wait until 6 weeks after 1.16 if we have something that's ready before.
Well, why don't we at least get this triaged first, see how we're doing in a couple of weeks or a month. And if we need to, we can cut a little early and then get online with a regular rhythm. But for now, we can just set the arbitrary, throw the dart at the date board and see what sticks.
Sounds good.
All right. So is there why don't I paste this high level theme thing inside of here?
Yeah, and then just on the date thing, maybe we could tag like a beta release or something along those lines.
Beta is still too uncertain.
Yeah, I would agree to that statement. I would rather, I hate formatting. Am I retarded? It's okay to say yes. It's okay to say yes.
It doesn't work. You can edit the other post, I think, and then.
All right, so we have V1 Alpha 2, right? And it's got the list in there. We can modify the syntax later on. So Andy did a bunch of cool work, which I highly appreciate, which she pre-triaged the list, and we can go through it that way. I think what I'm going to do first is, why do we have open items for V1 Alpha 1?
We just haven't gotten around to bumping them.
All right, so first one, release V011 critical. It's not that critical. It's been hanging around forever.
I think we said we could go ahead and close this out, and we actually just cut a 0.1.2 release today, so we can keep this around.
Hopefully folks can appreciate my loud typing.
Did you get a new keyboard, Tim?
I've gotten it. Well, I've had this for a while now, but I don't think we've had the group grooming in a while. You guys have been working on Cluster API, and
yeah,
I haven't been. Document how to implement provider-specific cluster cuddle. So I kind of, it's my opinion, take it with a grain of salt. I kind of hate the way cluster cuddle works.
What?
I think, I hope I'm not alone.
There should not be provider-specific cluster cuddles in the future.
Yeah.
So given that we're working on these other items, should we just kind of close this one?
I agree with that.
And also, if somebody wants to take the comment to close and do the play at home game, it doesn't have to be everyone staring at my keyboard and listening to me type.
I'm happy to do that so that you can move on to other ones if you want.
All right, 789 is this one. So document machine set, machine deployment, machine class.
I think this still needs to happen. I feel like it's low priority because these are generic controllers. But I do think, so now that we have continuously deployed documentation, it's just a question of somebody stepping up and doing it. I think it's low priority, but I would put it in V1 Alpha 2.
Do we have like automated hooks from the types to deploy sort of like that documentation, similar to how the OpenAPI that we do?
Yep.
Oh,
Well, sort of.
So on version master, it will now be deployed as of like earlier this week.
all right. Who wants to actually do this?
I'll do it.
All right. Backlog or P3 or P2 or P3?
P2 or P3.
All right. Well, I rescued you the question. A or B?
P3.
All right, that's backlog. All right. But dang. I don't want to do this to myself. So, hold on. I dunder mifflined it. Umbrella documentation pre-print requirements.
Okay, so why don't I go ahead and update this now? The only thing that's not done here is the machine set ticket that we discussed. So I think we can close the umbrella issue and just leave that open.
All right, cool. Next up. Everything else, I'm going to start to go through the doc that Andy has curated here.
And the subject headings are not in any necessary order or specific order. And this was just my first stab at trying to categorize things. So feel free to suggest other categories, more categories, moving issues, etc.
All right, so blame Andy. That's what I heard.
Yes.
All right. Kube cuddle edit machine fails validations. To repro, deploy a cluster, kube cuddle edit machine name, edit something else on it.
Yeah, this had to do with doing a kubectl edit with just a CRD object in general. So it was a client issue.
I'm missing, what do you mean the client issue?
Actually, you know what?
So-
I think this had to do with the embedded raw extension. So,
Well, so I traced through that Cube Open API reference to an issue or pull request, and it points to some other things as well. it seemed like there was a possibility that in a newer version of Kubernetes than when this issue was originally opened, it might be fixed. So somebody needs to go through and test the reproducer flow and see if it's still an issue.
Tigers?
Just give it to me. I can do it as we're speaking.
Right. Book. Bad machine set prevents other machine sets from scaling activity. Looks like
Yeah, so this one is if you have just foobarred YAML in your custom resource around metadata, the shared informer will try to do a list and it can't parse all the metadata, so it throws its hands up in the air, and anything trying to use the informer for machine sets in this case is just broken. So the controller is just like 100% broken. And I did a little bit of digging. There was, I know Liz had assigned it to herself. After she did that, I just did a little digging, and there were some indications that maybe there's a newer version of Kubernetes similar to the previous issue where this might be fixed.
Does anyone else want to tag along with Liz? This seems pretty nasty, or could be nasty if somebody foobars the.
Yeah, I mean, you can see like the labels there it's invalid because they're doing it as some weird. I don't even know how to describe what that is. It's not a string. It's certainly not a map. And so if you have that bad data, it blows up the whole informer.
Michael? So this passes validation for the API. It'll just take this messed up label section like that?
I don't remember specifically what the Open API setup is for machine set. But
yeah, I can look at this because we have a issue open internally about terrible logging around this area already. So I can look at this.
So one thing I got to fix here. Give me a second.
You won't be able to assign anybody unless they're a member of Kubernetes Suites, Tim.
1 second. See if I have superpowers.
I don't think superpowers work anymore because doesn't this all get synced from the master lists in whatever repo has it? Like you can add somebody, but then they'll lose their membership once the bot comes back around.
So
Kubernetes.
Michael, yeah, I know. Michael, you're going to need to file an issue. What's your GitHub handle? I'll CC you on the issue.
It's Michael Gugino, one word.
Oh, no. Could you paste it in chat? Because I'm terrible at spelling.
Sure.
I don't want to, like, some random dude in Italy is going to be like, what's going on? Thanks. All right, so what you'll need to do, Michael, is on the Kubernetes org. You're going to need to file a new issue. And it's over here. And there's like request membership. And this is going to be for the Kubernetes things org.
Okay, yeah, could you send me that link? And I'll bookmark that.
Here we go. I'll paste it in chat. Kabang. All right. So that one's might be fixed. That's definitely a bug. Or we should validate or verify. Cluster deployer should support multiple control plane machines for a cluster.
Yeah, this one, there was a pull request that is in Cluster API proper that allows you to specify multiple control plane machines, and I think it works. So
It definitely works. I tested this locally not long ago.
yeah, same here.
So why don't we mark it as closed then?
Well, there was that one item at the top where he said that it should belong it should be the responsibility of cluster API, but I think we should have a different issue to track control plane management.
Rock, paper, scissors, Jason.
Let's close this one.
I agree.
All right, so who's going to close it? It's 9:25.
I got it.
All right. Owner reference. Owner reference is not a set of machine deployment when the deployment is created in management cluster. What?
Yes. You can assign this one to me. It's a limitation of the current system, and it's one of the things that we probably have to tackle for V1 Alpha 2.
P1?
Yeah.
All right. Give me a second here. I start closing this stuff. Kabang. 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 All right. This is the one we did, right? Bot for stale vendored Cappy.
Yeah, I think this. Oh, this might have been one that I just decided to close and didn't get around to updating.
Okay.
So the strike through ones are already closed. You can skip over them.
Yeah, I got that. Not that dense.
You did say it's Friday, so
It is Friday. Packet provider.
This one's waiting on somebody to step up and volunteer to.
Do we need to keep this in the main repo though?
that's why. So I don't think it makes sense to have it in the main repo because there's no actionable work that's going to actually do anything in this repo.
I saw somebody in chat just the other day posted something about Packet. I don't know.
Yeah, so I posted in Slack saying, "Hey, do we still need this?" And somebody said, "Yeah, let's keep it open." And then, like you were saying, Michael, somebody else said, "Hey, we've been working on some Packet stuff." But again, there's not going to be any code that goes into this repository that has anything to do with Packet.
Hey, I have a question though. Should we open an issue? Somebody want to open an issue that we should list down, have a jump point for people to say like they've created a provider and here's the link to it. So if they create a Packet provider, they should be able to PR the main repo, at least for.
We actually do have that in the README.
There was something else that we were talking.
Yeah, there's, I don't know.
At the bottom of the README,
So.
there is a list of all providers, even external to Kubernetes.
All right.
So, and I think the reason why this sits under Cluster API is because I think they were requesting that if somebody was going to make one, that it live under, say, cluster lifecycle. But again, nobody's done anything with one good closing it.
Closing.
Hey, Tim, for that owner reference one that I had under might be fixed and Vince said we need to do it in V1 Alpha 2 or whenever, I assume we need to move that to a bucket.
This seems like API.
Data model. We don't have appropriate kinds in this, kind labels in this repo that I think are what we need. So again, I also think these labels generally distinct from somewhere else, right?
They're supposed to as part of the bot. So can somebody open an issue to fix Munge GitHub integration?
Yeah, I'll do that. Packet provider, add Go context to actuator methods. Are we going to change the actuators?
No. We're going to get rid of the machine actuator, like for V1 Alpha 2, if and when the proposal gets merged. So, but there's no plan for V1 Alpha 1 to tackle this.
This seems like
So this seems easy,
it seems easy.
but it's also a breaking change.
It doesn't have to be. Like, he proposed reconcile with context.
So here's my swag. It'd be nice to have. We don't need it for the thing. I put help one in it. Somebody wants to help it out. That'd be good. Does anyone want to do this? Bueller.
I think this is a good thing for someone to be onboarding, right? This is like a good learning project.
Okay, I'll leave it open as help wanted. So like when we talk about this stuff on Wednesday, we can be like, hey, there's a bunch of these extra things that we could potentially get. I'm not going to assign the milestone to it. I'm going to put in the next bucket, unless folks think that we can leave the help wanted bucket open for this cycle and then just move everything at the end.
I think leaving it open and maybe socializing it at some of the meetings might help.
Let's leave it in this milestone then, and then we can keep on talking about like, hey, look at all these issues that are open here.
And is this already groomed by somebody? I guess that's
what we're doing. So right now it looks fairly complete. Right now it doesn't have an assignee though. We're missing some labels on this repository that we normally use too for area. But
yeah, I filed 991 for that.
Okay. So I'll leave it in V1 Alpha 2 and we can use that as a. All right. Needs clarification, discussion, bucket assignment.
All right, but before you go into that, where should we move that go context one?
Move it to where? I put it in V1 Alpha 2 as help.
What bucket or category?
That almost looks like documentation. Kind of. Or
it's more like it's the API, it's the interface definition. It's like an architecture.
Well, it's kind cleanup, I think.
Okay. I don't have a cleanup, so I'll make a cleanup one.
Does somebody want to like go to the KubeADM repo or something to like see all the different areas? Define cluster cuddle goals and non-goals. I might actually want to take that one because there's a strong desire in like V1 Alpha 2 to like Highlander those damn cluster cuddles.
So the problem that I see is that so far for V1 Alpha 2, we haven't talked about control plane management yet, which is the main reason why cluster cuddle requires the interface into the providers today.
I'm going to assign this to me for funsies. I'm going to clear my backlog.
Just to circle back on the actuator interface bug, according to our documents, the interface methods already have context as the first argument. So I was confused on that one. Posted a link to our doc in the chat there.
It might be a documentation issue. I don't think we do any.
Yeah, this is cluster actuator. They don't have context as the first arg, or it doesn't.
Yeah, the machine
cluster actuator. Okay, that's where I was missing. I was thinking machine actuator.
Tim, not to make you go backwards, but I do think you missed two issues from the suggest closing list. The first one is allow provider-specific validation of provider config, and the second one is separating machine APIs from cluster APIs.
1 second. Let me start closing these other things.
Sure.
Okay. and close, and leave that open. And allow provider-specific validation of provider config in the cluster resource.
So we would like to get rid of any raw extension fields, which is where this issue arises. So if we move to having no raw extensions, then you can do validating webhooks and along with open API schema validation. So I think this, we could either close this if everybody is on the same page. We could keep it open and say we're going to use this to track getting rid of the raw extensions.
I think we should use it to track getting rid of the raw extensions because it provides context for what the problem is and will aim towards actually solving the core problem.
This only mentions a cluster resource, and we're tackling machines only.
Yeah, that was going to be my point. Like, we may decide on doing this for clusters later, but that's not in scope right now.
And there is a comment about halfway down that says, does it apply to machine also? And Caesar says yes. And I agree.
Maybe we should file a separate issue for machines for tracking if we want to have that as a tracker in this release.
Yeah, I mean, that way we can close the machine one sooner.
So I will leave this on next, important long term. I don't have the kind API change. Does somebody want to open a mirror, reference this one for machine?
Yeah, I'll do it. I also have a process question for you, Tim. Is there a difference between the next milestone and a blank milestone for an issue?
Blank milestone.
Like if you don't set a milestone for an issue.
So
Yes,
next
because
it shows that it's been triaged.
yes, exactly.
Okay,
next
thank
shows
you.
that you've taken a look at it. All right. So next one is separate machines API from cluster API. This is the longer term one that we've talked about many, many times. I think in the fullness of time, we've discussed that like as the APIs mature and we have firm versioning set up in semantics, and actually releasing. So like one of the things, I don't know if we have any issues for it, that drives me insane is release automation for this stuff. We currently have to poke just in Santa Barbara for the Google buckets to get everything in place.
Chuck,
So
can you talk about that?
Yes, for sure. So for release automation, there is a script for cluster API provider AWS that we use to do most of the things. The one big sticking point, like you mentioned, is waiting for the GCR, someone to push the GCR buckets. Amy is working with Kate's infra right now to get the image promoter process in place. So that's stuff that DIMS set up so that we can push to a staging bucket. And then there's some proud job that will just like move that to some production bucket. And we can control who has access to the staging bucket through Google Groups list.
So-
that whole work's not set up yet. So Amy's helping the Kate's infra team like get that work finished.
But if we get rid of a bunch of the framework mechanisms, we will have core bootstrap controllers that we want to publish out of cluster API proper, right?
Core bootstrap control, what do you mean?
We will have a common set. We have a common one that's just like the lowest common denominator, the reference implementation.
Are
we're
you
gonna-
talking
we're
about
gonna-
binaries? Are you talking about images?
Images.
Right, so the problem with images is that we don't have access to the repo, right, to push images, container images.
Well, the container images are pushed to a GCS bucket, so we're going to need to have automation on CAPI is basically what I'm saying.
I agree, but we don't even have the ability to push images yet. So we could build the automation before the images exist or before the process exists. That's fine.
Yeah. So
Why the image pushing is done?
Why don't we open an issue to at least for tracking for this cycle to try and at least get progress made on this one?
Yeah.
So as we modify CAPI and we push images out, we have the details. Because right now I think it's all a framework mostly for CAPI, but it won't be in the future.
Totally. I mean, it's not really a framework right now, right? We use machine deployment and machine set controllers.
So that is important long term. Needs clarification. Our discussion book assignment. 1 second here. Kabang. Kabang. I already did that one. Support adopting a cluster from a set of existing machines. So this is the weird one. I think you can hijack this with the updated bootstrapping. You should be able to do this within your own Bootstrap controller, and you'd have to hijack it on your own. But I don't know if we want to like promote this idea, because we made several statements where like we don't want to adopt existing machines.
It's also a known goal in the project scope and that we already merged. So I 100% agree with that.
But I want to let people know that we're making it possible. But you know, if you blast your foot off, that's your problem.
I think anybody that has sufficient knowledge to do it correctly will come to that conclusion on their own. We are actually provisioning machines and then adopting machine objects, but our model is different than what's currently going on upstream.
Yeah, I'm okay with closing. Who wants to close this one? It's issue number 16.
I can close it.
Update cluster code will create when machine objects have a provisioning indication. This is kind of probably going to change quite a bit with the V1 Alpha 2.
I had a comment a few days ago. I honestly don't understand what this is asking for. Does this have something to do with remote node references?
The master may not be registering with the stack that provisions it. David, you're all over this. You got context here?
He said he was stepping away for a little bit.
No.
As far as I can tell, this has to do with the fact that today we don't know when a machine is actually ready or not. And we kind of have a hack in place for cluster cuddle by setting an annotation, or the provider does. But at the same time, I don't see any point in just tracking this, because we have to track the machine state itself separately. So
I didn't understand the last comment, Jason.
well, I'm just saying, like, we have bigger issues when it comes to determining if a machine's ready or not than just cluster cuddle. So we should probably be tracking that work rather than a specific task for cluster cuddle.
I think that's fair. I think the conclusion of this issue was that we need to have a top level field called ready, so that other components can depend on that field instead of an annotation. But you're right, the general state of the system is a larger problem. So I'm okay with closing this.
Okay, do you want to close this one, David? It's 2:53.
Yes.
Add unit integration tests for cluster client. We've added a bunch. I think there's a bunch more we could probably do.
Yeah,
So cluster
the
client
comments.
is specific to cluster cuddle, though.
Yeah, the initial description, Jan's question, and Jessica's reply didn't exactly make sense to me in terms of, is there work that needs to be done?
It's okay for us to close and open new ones, especially around testing automation. So like if folks see gaps in testing, I would just say open new issues because I think we should probably, Vince, can you log an issue to update our templates and make them a little bit more verbose? I have some good templates that we can reference to.
Yes, I agree, Tim, especially for issues that are over a year old that haven't gotten any TLC. I'd much rather close something, and then if there are identified gaps, let's open new issues.
Yeah, and we should probably do a separate session where we kind of like, one thing we haven't done, I haven't done it with this group since the very beginning of Cluster API project, is do a full code walkthrough, right? And do the Chuck is intimately familiar with this, where like one person is the issue logger, and we have the group walk through the code. And as we do that, we start to open a bunch of issues along the way. Perhaps maybe next week sometime, definitely not earlier, do a full code walkthrough to identify like key gaps that are common things that are not, don't have issues for them.
If we could do that the week after next, that would be great for me.
The week after next. Let me take a look at my calendar. You on vacation or something, Mike?
No, I've got travel for work.
No. So I don't see a problem with that.
I'll make a note to schedule something.
We can have that one be a little bit more wide open, and it'd be fun for us to actually have a code walkthrough.
Yep.
You can hear you can already hear my colorful WTFs. Controller disruption budgets. This is one of mine that I've like logged forever. Talked about. So do we ever want to do this, or do we want to do? Here's a fundamental question. Do we want to start adding sort of disruption budget fields to things like machines, machine sets? I think it's, yeah. I don't know if we do it. It'd probably be just for machines. I don't know if you can do it to sets. Versus, or do we want to have stepwise modifiers to controllers the way it's done in KK for every other controller? Because the blast radius, especially if we eventually get to ASGs, the blast radius is like super high.
I guess I don't really understand the context of disruption budgets here. I understand how they work for pods because they have to be scheduled somewhere. But
so it's just a matter of like, imagine you're doing an update or you're deploying or deleting something. You don't want to like just blast everything. You want to do it, especially an upgrade is the most common scenario. If you have an upgrade, you want to do it in a piecemeal fashion. And if you had a disruption budget that you could set, that would enable you the ability to do it like 5 at a time. So that way it does, if something's really awkward, it prevents you from accidentally blasting your foot off.
And we can do that with machine deployments today, but we can't do it. There's nothing that evaluates it at the machine level. So I don't know if the machine deployment max surge and max unavailable is sufficient or not.
yeah, again, I guess it comes back to architectural. Like I'm imagining machine objects get deleted and replaced. So is there some higher level controller that's walking through that? I would think that would be the machine deployment.
I think what we should do is just document. This might just be a documentation issue then. If you're going to have multiple machines, do them in deployments. Don't do them as raw machines. But I do know that a lot of people today still do things in weird ways, right? A person can do non-deployments and do them as pods today. So where's the documentation?
I'm going to just, while you're typing that, I'm going to scroll back to the meeting notes and see if I can figure out what they were talking about.
You know, the other issue with this generally is you might have a mismatch from the application layer they have particular disruption budgets that might not align with the machine layer.
Oh, that should be supported with your, as you tear down machines, that should be supported a layer up, right?
Yeah,
I
hopefully you have
suppose,
enough capacity, I guess. Yeah.
yeah. That's in theory, but no, I bet you no one's ever tested it.
Yep. So the issue right now is that the only thing that would take into account pod disruption budgets for machine deletion today would be with the kind of prototype integration with the auto scaler, because that integrates with a lot of the scheduling logic.
Well, part of deleting a machine should be that we cordon and drain, right? If we do that properly, it should never be a problem. But I would bet people money that like not every provider does that right.
Well, that's something that we wanted to upstream. We've moved the drain logic to the machine controller side of the actuator interface, because that should be more or less uniform.
Yeah, we definitely want to use cordoning and draining to or move it to machines.
Yeah, and the problem with that today is the lack of remote node references.
Can you
So you
open?
can only do it on self-managed clusters.
Can you open an issue, Michael, with regards to centralizing deletion, cordon, and drain?
You mean node draining?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So I looked at the meeting notes around disruption budgets, and it basically seems like if we just suggest machine deployments with the rolling updates, that'll be sufficient.
I guarantee you people are doing it wrong. Everything
I'm going to edit the description on this one and the title.
I'll leave it as help wanted in documentation for now. It's a good thing for people to kind of like walk through the docs and help out. What time did we start this thing?
Today?
11.
All right, let's time box it to an hour. We can always go through more next week, and people should open issues, because I think it's going to take us a while to get everything cleaned up. Provider plugins for cluster cuddle. I kind of want to close this. I don't want to do. We can leave it open, I guess, until we actually.
I think the idea, like the first couple of things about there's some AWS specific tasks. There's getting console logs for a machine. Maybe there's a suite of kube control plugins that would fall under like a cluster API umbrella. So I like the idea of trying to standardize some of the functionality that people will want to use where it spans providers. Certainly a long-term or backlog thing.
I'm just going to leave it there and help wanted. I do think in the fullness of time, I want there to be like one cluster cuddle and some automation built around it. Right?
Totally agree.
That's the one thing I hate about Google Docs is when people are all kind of editing and then the thing pops over the top of it and I can't see. Isn't this done, Jason? Or is it there's still some?
So the phases are implemented, but the top level commands don't directly use the phases. I'm fine with closing this, and if we need to, we can do follow-up.
I kind of want to leave it open, to be honest. There's a lot of work
help wanted.
Yeah. In part because there's a lot of cluster cuddle work that needs to be done. And what I might do at a different time, we might want to add area like cluster cuddle. We might want to like lump all that stuff together. So, or it'd be area CMD or command line or whatever. One-shot deployment.
Yeah, I added that feature request. I put link in chat.
Okay.
I'm going to modify it just a bit, Michael, to add cordon in there in addition to draining.
Right, that makes sense.
You said you were interested in it?
Well, it kind of depends on where the pieces fall. What we end up doing with the machine controller. We obviously need a place that makes sense to do this. I think the place that makes most sense is in the machine controller as it is today, but on the machine controller side of the actuator interface. If we end up doing like an infrastructure provisioner controller, then we talked the other day briefly about having that boilerplate SDK or something that somebody could fork, and this would live in that boilerplate. So it's functionality we provide, but it would probably need to exist in the actual provider implementation still.
All right, we'll leave it open. We'll have to like evaluate important soon view and alpha. All right, that's enough data for us to take a look at it again. Cluster kernel should support management clusters.
I think this is one of the P0 issues that we put in our goals, right? Or I'm sorry, this is for cluster control. No.
This is just don't delete the Bootstrap cluster. Like treat the Bootstrap cluster as a first class thing if you make that decision.
Isn't that already
Personally, sorry, Dave.
Isn't that an option? You could just say, for debugging purposes, Alejandro implemented a flag so that the ephemeral cluster doesn't have to be ephemeral. It can just live on.
Yeah,
If that's there, we can just close it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been there for a while, if I recall correctly.
So I think the Bootstrap cluster remains, but the problem is that it pivots the cluster API components to the created cluster as well.
That would be a problem.
And I think so. And I think this comes down to that other issue that we had around the scope and the goals of Cluster Cuddle. Because in my mind, I would kind of like to see Cluster Cuddle just be a management cluster bootstrapper, in which case this workflow doesn't really make sense.
All right, I'm going to leave it open for the time being. I unassigned it. It's a feature for important soon for us to take a look at. We got 6 more minutes here. Set up Bootstrap cluster cleanup as false by default. This is almost the exact, sounds very similar.
Yeah, it's almost
related. It's just we should change a Boolean default from true to false. But I mean, it's the same question that Jason has around should this be a function or not.
All right, so I'm going to take a long-term view of Cluster Cuddle. I will take that for my one thing I can actually work on for the one and only thing. I will not do anything other than that. Other than like I'll put on my cat wrangler hat and try and make sure that cats go in one kind of direction. Cluster Cuddle should use alpha phases. Yeah.
This is one of the outstanding issues on that umbrella issue that we had.
All right. Why don't I do this? I will commit to walking through the rest of Cluster Cuddle stuff and kind of put them in our umbrella. We got 5 minutes left. Are there other key things in this list that think we should address here real quick?
Well, and just for clarification, this is the list of things that I either thought we needed to discuss or I didn't have a good category for them.
Yeah. All right, so enable IBM Power S390 support for Cluster API. I'm gonna say
The IBM folks have actually already contributed multi-arch support. The only thing we're missing is automated testing for it.
And didn't they tell you in Barcelona that we could use their resources, or they would help set something up for CI?
They can do federated testing.
Yep, that's what they're planning on doing.
All right, so I will put it in for them to do. Any other things that pop out here while we're at it?
Yeah, I filed one the unable to delete machine where a machine controller is running.
It was in the list.
It was in the list, yeah.
But
okay.
It's the fourth one, yeah. Jason, have you seen this description before?
So this is new to me. I missed it because I was out on PTO when it got filed, but this is, it was specifically set up this way because we wanted to avoid like orphaning resources. So we'd have to figure out how to safely do this.
I think, I don't know if, do you support like a single master deployment here? That would obviously be helpful in that situation. But on the other hand, if you have 3 masters, it's not that helpful because there's hopefully a good reason somebody wanted to delete that machine. And currently that's not achievable. And then it still has that creation timestamp. So if for some reason maybe that host gets rebooted or whatever sometime later, then it gets deleted and it might be unexpectedly.
Yeah, we just need to be sure that as we solve this, we don't, we do it in a safe way so that, in the case of most clusters deployed with cluster cuddle, you have the controller running on the initial control plane instance, and, you want to prevent that one from, obviously being deleted, because if you do that, then you lose control of the cluster. So.
All right. I want to call it, we're at time. We have a lot more to go through. So maybe we'll do some more grooming a little bit next week, but we'll record it, Michael. If there are issues that you're interested in, just CC yourself on those issues. This doc, hold on, let me get you, we should put the doc in the cluster API channel. Did you put a link there, Andy?
I did, yeah.
Right. So anybody should be able to take a look at the doc. And the bots, once you're assigned to the org, you can say /assign yourself, and you can self-assign anything to yourself too.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Any other fun plans for the weekend? Final last notes? Something happy? Something funny?
I'm gonna watch Black Mirror, although I've heard it's got terrible reviews.
Is it good, bad?
I'm flying to Berlin this week. Yeah.
How's excited? Are you going to the Choreo factory?
I don't know. It's I'm going for work, so whatever the boss has planned.
All right. I know there's a lot of CoreOS folks there, so let them know we say hi.
Yeah, will do.
Okay. Anyway, have a great weekend, everybody. Take care.
Thanks. See ya.
See ya.